I was almost attacked and taken. This happened when I was 19 or 20. My husband, my son, and I only lived about a mile from my dad, his girlfriend, my little sister 15, and my baby brother 7 months. My son was 2 at the time, and he absolutely loved playing with my little brother, so he wanted to spend the night with my dad. So I decided to walk him over after asking my dad if he could stay. He was at work, but said it was fine and told me to take him over, and his girlfriend and my sister were home. I packed his bag, put him in the stroller, and off we were. Just to clarify, me and my husband only had one car at the time, and he was at work with it, plus it was a nice summer day. We got there no problem, and instead of leaving before it got too late, I decided to stay for dinner. Who's gonna turn down some food that you didn't have to make? Anyways, my dad's girlfriend's car was in the shop, so I had to walk home in the dark. It was 10 o'clock by the time I left. My sister and my dad's girlfriend tried to talk me into waiting until my dad got home around 11, and he would drive me home. I declined and headed out telling them I would be fine. We live in a relatively safe neighborhood, just the occasional big crime. I was about halfway home when I put in one of my earbuds and started listening to unit number 522 stories. I then thought I heard a noise behind me, so I glanced over my shoulder and see a man and woman walking about 50 feet behind me. They looked normal, wearing regular looking clothes, and they were holding hands and talking. They acted like they didn't even realize I was there. I didn't pay any attention to them. I turned a corner off the main street and onto a side street. Then I realized they were only about 15 feet behind me. I started to get nervous, but I wasn't freaking out. Maybe they just walked fast. As soon as I get around the corner, I picked up the pace. Then a few seconds later, they turned the corner and started sprinting at me. I freaked out and started running too. And my mind went to someone is chasing them before I glanced over my shoulder and saw the look on the guy's face. He had the most evil smile I could imagine. The image is still burned into my mind no matter how bad I want to forget it. I start making random turns down roads trying to lose them and not lead them to my house. I got a little ahead of them, but they weren't too far behind. I tried losing them by running through a random person's backyard, which turned out to be vacant, and was an overgrown jungle. I ended up getting covered in dirt and cut up my legs on thorns. I was wearing shorts. I made it back out to the main road and saw a truck up ahead and started running towards it, waving my arms and screaming. This guy's about 20 feet behind me. He caught up some in the backyard. I see the truck starting to slow down. When it gets closer, I realize it's my dad. He jumps out of the truck without shutting it off with a bat in his hand. He starts running towards me and the guy turns around and starts running the other way. My dad wanted to chase him down, but he was more concerned about making sure I was okay. I have no idea what happened to the woman. She was nowhere to be seen. My dad took me home and stayed with me until my husband got home around midnight. I don't know what they wanted, or who they were, and I'm glad I didn't find out. Psycho ex-husband tried to kidnap me. The scariest thing that ever happened to me came from the person closest to me. My ex-husband and I were both only 19 when we married. When we first met, everything was glorious. I moved in with him and his family because me and mine were having a lot of trouble at the time. And for the first year, all was golden. Then one day, his stepdad went missing. The police found his body almost a week later, murdered. The tragedy tore through the three of them, Nikki, his mother, and his sister, with an intensity similar to a massive hurricane. If Nikki's biological father had been present, that might have been one thing, but that piece of human excrement was not just absent, but only made the occasional appearance to steal one of the kids' social security checks from the mail on arrival. And that was usually when he knew no one would be home. When Fiona married Dave, he became their father. The only father they had. He became their true family. After the homicide, Nikki's whole personality shifted towards darkness. He would rant and rave like a man possessed, and become violent if I didn't do everything he told me to. To this day, I have scars from a physical altercation with his sister, on being commanded to attack her and having no choice but to do so, for example. The scars make me who I am now, a survivor. But I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone. Being terrified for your life every single day, and never knowing if any given moment could lead to your last is exhausting and traumatizing, to say the least. One day, we got into it so badly, I told him I wanted a divorce. He kicked me out of my own car at my parents' house and tore out of the driveway, spraying gravel everywhere and leaving puffs of dust floating up towards the sky. I was utterly distraught by the entire situation at that point, completely at my wit's end. Yet for some reason, I still loved him, still wanted to make things work out, and for us to stay together. So when he called and begged for the chance to just talk things over, and went outside to anxiously wait for him to return and pick me up, I expected him to have calmed down by the time he arrived. At least, that was what his tone had suggested over the phone. But when I got in the car, the whole vibe felt off. Chaotic. The tension was almost physically too much to handle. We rode in silence for about 5 minutes before he shot me a quick glare and then returned his attention to the road. His dark eyes drilled right through me, their anger giving off a certain glint like that of coal. "You know you're my wife, right?" he asked in a syrupy, silky sweet voice. "That means you belong to me." I didn't really know how to respond to that, so I said nothing. My mind turned 1,000 miles an hour, deciphering what he was telling me. His level of possessiveness over me had steadily increased in the past 6 months or so, after Dave's death, as if he were terrified of me disappearing along with the glue that had held his tiny little broken family together. My subconscious screamed at me that the whole thing had been a ruse, a trick to lure me back into the car. I looked down at my hands in my lap, wringing them together until my knuckles turned red. "I thought you wanted to fix things." He smirked, and my gut went cold. My worst fears confirmed in that twisted, psychotic expression of his. "What do you think this is?" he replied. "It feels like a trick," I told him. He pursed his lips together, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. His shoulders tensed and his expression grew more malevolent than ever. "That's because it was a trick," he murmured. "If I can't have you, no one can." Until the moment he said the words aloud, I always thought of that expression as one of those you only ever hear or read in fiction. It never occurred to me that there was a reason it existed. Someone, or many others most likely, who had heard the phrase and felt the sheer horror that accompanied its implication. In the course of our relationship, I endured punches, kicks, rape, 2 totaled cars, and multiple death threats. A couple of weeks after that incident, I finally managed to get away from him for good. I stayed the night at a friend's house after getting what little things I needed. She lived not far from his grandparents, but I didn't really think anything of it, because the neighborhood is one of those upscale, quiet, safe kind of suburbs. We partied most of the night. She went upstairs to sleep around 1, and left me on the couch in the living room watching TV, willing myself to pass out. About an hour later, around 2 a.m., I felt like someone was watching me. I looked over at the sliding doors to my left that led out into the backyard. There he was. He was standing outside in the dark, in the rain, watching me and crying with his fists clenched. I felt my eyes grow wide, and I sank slowly down into the leather cushions as if they would make me disappear from sight. I don't know how much longer he was there. When I looked again, he was gone. The next day, when my mom came to get me, because he wrecked my car so I no longer had a ride, he was standing at the corner staring at her as she drove past. We had to get a police escort to take us straight to the station to get a restraining order. I spent the next year getting the divorce straightened out and getting the rest of my belongings that he was trying to hold hostage, like my birth certificate, diploma, and social security card. I spent the next 6 years, even after entering into a wonderful and truly loving relationship, in fear that he would come for me. Even now, 8 years later, sometimes he will still try to contact me through other people or fake accounts on social media. Sometimes the most unsuspecting person is the one you have to worry about. Sometimes all it takes is one tragedy to twist a person completely inside and turn them into a monster on the outside. This was really a long series of scary stories rolled into one, I suppose, and I apologize for any long-windedness. Those were the most horrifying experiences of my life thus far, and I hope to never have any that might equal them. Almost kidnapped by a creep at the gas station. When I was 17, 18-ish, I was driving home from a friend's house after a movie marathon. It was around 1 a.m. when I left, and a decent drive. Not quite halfway, my gas light came on. Now I had a few creepy catcall experiences at gas stations, and was a little paranoid stopping that late in the middle of nowhere as an 110-pound teenage girl. In the end, I think if I wasn't so cautious, I would have been kidnapped or killed. The first gas station I came across was well lit, and in a pretty open space. I drove up to the pump and looked around my car mirrors before getting out. As I was starting to pump gas, this normal-looking guy comes out of the gas station shop and starts smoking a cigarette. The pump kept clicking off and not working, so I started messing with it, trying to get it to pump. This guy starts watching me, laughing. I assume he was laughing to himself, watching a teenage girl trying to pump gas. After getting maybe 1/4 of a gallon, I gave up and moved to a new pump. At this point, if I didn't do absolutely everything I did, I would have been screwed. When I got back into my car, I locked my doors just to drive to the other pump. I checked all my mirrors before getting out or shutting off my car again. Old 90s Beetle that didn't always start right away. That's when I saw the guy walking up to my car. He was smiling, walking up to the driver's side window. Not wanting him next to me, I rolled down the passenger window. He paused for a moment, and then smiled to himself and walked to the passenger window. He stuck his head all the way inside my window to talk to me. "Hey, I know this seems really weird, but I promise I'm not a creep or anything. My car broke down," points to the red SUV, "and I need a ride home. It's just a half a mile up the road." "Sorry, but I don't know you." "Oh no, I totally get it. I thought it was pretty weird as I was walking up here, but it's only a half a mile up the road. I'm totally stranded." "I wish I could help you, but I really don't know you." "Yeah, I got you. If you had a truck or something, I'd offer to ride in the back." Looks expectantly. "Sorry, no." All of a sudden he looked pissed. He yanked at my door, but I had locked it before. Then he reached for the inside door handle through the window. My car was still running, and I slammed it into first and peeled out as he opened the door. The car taking off slammed it shut, and I sped off. I called the police after I got away. They looked at the gas station cameras, and right after I left, he got into his red SUV and drove off. If I hadn't locked my doors the second time, I would have been fucked. If I let him come to the driver's side window, he could have grabbed me. If I had shut off my car, I wouldn't have been able to drive off in time. If I didn't double check my mirrors, I would have been outside my car when he came up to me.